Hola a todos y qué tal, bienvenidos a otro episodio de Amigos de Behavioral Pills. Aquí yo soy Choyos, un behavioral designer que me encanta compartir experiencias, historias y más aún invitados que son realmente de lujo. Normalmente mis invitados vienen de diferentes partes del mundo. Comencé mucho en el país en donde estoy, que es Perú, pero luego poco a poco fuimos abriéndonos a otros países de Latinoamérica. En algunos casos invitados fuera de Latinoamérica y que no hablan español, como es el caso de mi invitada de hoy, pero es una invitada de lujo realmente. Es una persona, es una profesional que tiene muchísima experiencia, no solamente en temas de behavioral science, behavioral design, sino también en el tema de diseño de experiencias, diseño de productos, marketing y otros temas, y cómo se unen ambos puntos. Y es una de las profesionales que más recomiendo seguir. Lo he mencionado en varios de mis posts, digamos, diseños que he hecho, donde recomiendo seguir a ciertas personas por su contenido. Tiene un libro extraordinario que ya vamos a hablar acerca de él, pero también tiene contenido en YouTube, tiene contenido por correo electrónico, página web, dicta cursos. Olvídense, es una fuente de información inagotable. Así que lo que voy a hacer es que, como mi invitada no, obviamente habla español, voy a pasar ahora al inglés para darle la bienvenida y espero que puedan disfrutar tanto este programa como yo lo voy a disfrutar haciéndolo. Así que pasamos al inglés en un segundo, que es now. So today I'm going to give a warm welcome to a very special guest that I've been following for so long, and to not make it anything, to not extend it unnecessarily, I want to say hello to Jen Clinehens, the very famous Jen Clinehens. How are you doing, Jen?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Great, 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 great. I'm so happy to have you on the show. I've been following your material, everything you've been doing from now. Just so everyone knows, Jen Clinehens is the founder of Choice Hacking. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to tell us a little bit more about Choice Hacking, because it's
Sure.
so many things. Like, it's related to the book. It's like your brand, your YouTube channel. It's like everything is related with that brand, but just wanted to first give you a warm welcome, just so everyone knows. Jen has a very long experience in applying behavioral science, behavioral design principles, and whatnot into many things related to like marketing, product development, customer experience. So I'm so glad to have you here, because one of the main things I love about having guests on the show is to talk about experience, like hands-on experience, like doing stuff with information you have. So I think like you're the best example we can have here. So before I start with so many questions I would love to address and maybe know about yourself and your experience, Jen, and get to share with my followers. First off, can you tell us a little bit about you? Like, where are you from? What are you doing? Like, how, like, what is choice hacking from your own words? Like, it would be awesome
Sure.
to listen.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with what is choice hacking, because you're right. It is a lot of things. I'm not very creative when it comes to naming things. So I pretty much figured there was one name that worked and I use it for everything. So choice hacking actually started as a book. So I had been working for many years in product innovation and customer experience, using behavioral science, psychology, predictive AI tools, things like that. And I really felt like there was a lack of information out there for people who were customer experience, product developers, marketers who wanted to apply behavioral science. Rather than teaching behavioral scientists about customer experience, we kind of went the other direction with it. And so I wrote the book after a series of blog posts that people had really responded to. And I elaborated on this framework that I had created just through doing work in advertising agencies and brand side as well. Things that have been working for me is kind of a good general framework to say, like, all right, there's a million behavioral science principles. How does this actually work in the real world? Like, how do I use it with customer journey mapping? How do I use it with digital products and physical products? How does it all come together? So that is the aim and the ambition of the book. The book then turned into a website, which is an e-learning platform where I've got a ton of free articles. And then we also sell courses, and we do short sort of workshop learning sessions as well. There's a podcast called Choice Hacking. I mean, it just goes on and on. We're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're in a lot of different places. And really the ambition is to help marketers in particular, but also product designers, product managers, UX folks, learn about ways to use behavioral science practically. So that means kind of bridging the gap between people who have a really uh, like impressive expertise in something marketing related, but they want to expand the knowledge into psychology, neuromarketing, behavioral science in particular, using things like predictive AI so we can kind of speed up user research and things like that. And experimentation and just how do we learn the fundamentals, but then how do we also think about the fundamentals and applying them in a business context? So that's sort of the story of choice hacking. Do you think that covers it?
That definitely covers it. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was a very, very excellent explanation of choice hacking, and I love it because in my own experience, I actually follow you like for quite some time, like
Mm.
from your book. Actually, I really
Oh,
enjoyed your
amazing.
book. Yeah, I mean, there are so many books that so many professionals
Mm.
recommend reading. Okay, like basically like the like the big names, right? Like Daniel
Yeah.
Kahneman, Dan Ariely, and Richard Thaler,
Mm.
whatnot, right? So those are like cool books that talk about principles, either if they work or don't because of the crisis of replicability. Okay,
Mm.
that's I'm not going to get into that, but it's always interesting literature just to like nice to
Mm-hmm.
know, like. But
Mm-hmm.
what used to happens to my students and people that follow me and ask me questions is like, okay, so now I understand like what social proof or whatever, or system
Mm-hmm.
1, system 2, but what do I do with that?
Yeah.
So yeah, and what you mentioned is like you're the same question you had in your mind. It was the same thing I had on mine, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't come from academia. I come from
Mm-hmm.
business, marketing, research, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to choice hacking, and I strongly recommend your book, obviously, to everyone who's listening, is that I could see like you were, and that would be like my first question, like where
Mm-hmm.
how did you come up with the idea of the choice model? Because it's it's not like it's not directly related to psychological principles or nudges. It
Mm-hmm.
is, but it doesn't seem like your focus, right? Like saying, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I built this on the principles. I built this just to, like what you said, to design better products, better
Mm-hmm.
experience better experiences. Like that is your main focus,
Mm-hmm.
using whatever you want to know or get from the behavioral science. Is that correct? Like,
Mm-hmm.
did it come from there? Like, what was your inspiration to build the choice model?
I mean, to be honest with you, it was working with clients and trying to explain how behavioral science could be used for these clients. Because I think, uh, and this is so a little bit of background, like I am from America, I'm from the US, or from North America, I should say. And I have
Yeah.
lived now in the UK for a while. Behavioral science is a really big deal here in England, especially because obviously you get like the Nudge Unit, and you've got like Rory Sutherland, and you've got
Yeah,
Richard Shotton, and all of these kind of big names in the discipline.
exactly.
Um, I had a lot of clients who were like, "We need to do behavioral science. We need to do behavioral science," but they thought it was like nudging. They thought it was. They didn't really have like an idea in their head about
Yeah.
how you could use it outside of the context of a nudge. And I'll be honest, like I do nudging. I design, like digital experiences, interactions. I mean, the sort of normal choice architecture stuff you would think of when you think of behavioral science. But so often for me, working with these clients, they were like, okay, I get the nudge and I don't want to nudge. And it's like, well, there's many other things you can use it for, right? So things like the peak end rule that can help us from a customer experience perspective to
Definitely.
prioritize budget. I mean, there's so many ways you can use it to think, in different ways, kind of think laterally with the principles. Um, and while I do talk about nudging within the choice framework, it's really more focused on the bigger things that drive memory, they drive judgments, opinions of a brand. So, if we kind of go through the different letters. So C is clear. So, right. So this would speak to things like, when I go into a store, do I know where things are? If I'm in a grocery store, is it clear to me where the next steps are? Where's the veg? Where's the fruit? Where's the cereal? Can I find my way through an experience really easily? In a digital experience, that might be, where's the call to action? Are there too many things on this page? So really just like the
Definitely.
very mechanics of like, can I make my way through this experience? H is holistic. And this is where I was doing a lot of work with and for clients, which is tying together sort of the digital world, the physical world, the whole customer experience, which is, everything from seeing an ad on TV to going into a physical store or going online, using an app, buying something, having to deal with support, being loyal, dealing with loyalty programs, things like that. So thinking about how to, what are some of the behavioral science principles that might pull through that idea of being a holistic experience, right? So CHO is open. So this talks about things
Mhm.
like operational transparency. So if you
Yeah,
think about a brand like, Subway, where you can see people making sandwiches, or Starbucks, where
exactly.
you can peek over the espresso machine and see them, making coffee. How are we sort of communicating back and forth with the customer? Can they really see, behind the whole like curtain of what I think we intend for them to see, and we sometimes are scared that they might, peek behind and see something else. I, as individual, which I think in customer experience especially is very self-explanatory. I mean, everybody's chasing personalization. I do talk a little bit about, is it really about hyper personalization? Is it more about like general elements of personalization? So you could say like, instead of digging deep into all this customer data and creating something like Spotify Wrapped, which is great,
Yeah.
but not practical for most brands, could you just
Mhm.
put up a billboard that says like, hey, we love, this is like Budweiser beer. We love being in Milwaukee, in
Mhm.
Milwaukee, like little things like that. How, Starbucks does it quite a bit as well with, customizing stores so that you have a
Yeah.
mural of the city that you're
Yeah.
in.
Or,
Just the
or
little
the
things
the
that you can do.
cups they have for the
Yeah.
cities, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, another good example. So, what are some of the things that you can do that aren't like really heavy lifting from a data perspective, though all that stuff is nice too, right? Digging into a mountain of not always clean and organized data.
That's right.
But yeah, how could we do it? So CHOIC, contextual. So that
See.
is where, yeah, contextual, you get into all of the environmental
Yeah.
and contextual clues. So that would be things like default, choice architecture. All of the nudges kind of fit under that particular C.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
as well as some things, like, and we can talk about this all day long, but the spirit of priming, if not the effect of priming, because as we know, you talked about the replication crisis, priming in particular has been sort of like, I don't want to say disproven, because a lot of people would say it hasn't
Yeah.
been, the principle itself has not been disproven, but a lot of the
Yeah.
very specific studies that seem a
Evidence
little
or
bit too
yeah.
good to be true suddenly are not actually true, which is fine. But when I am working with these behavioral science principles or the concept of something like priming, so think about going
Mhm.
into a store and they have a custom scent that's pumped through the store. So like Victoria's Secret does this, like Abercrombie and Fitch, a lot of retail stores, and it has measurable effects on their customer experience. So whether we want to call that priming or we want to call that, you know, environmental
Whatever. Yeah.
priming, I mean, there's a lot of different like lenses we could look at it through. But the point being is that, you're kind of creating this context and environment that then is getting people ready to buy something. CHOIC, and then E is emotional,
Final E.
um,
Emotional.
which is an incredibly important one, especially when you start to think about a lot of the customer experience professionals out there are very focused on effectiveness, efficiency, and they forget sometimes about the magic that you need and the emotional sort of bond that you need to create with customers to grow your brand, to become something that people kind of make a habit because it makes them feel good when they interact with your business. So, of all of those, I think E is probably the most overlooked or sometimes the most dismissed. So, I think for me that section of the framework in particular was really important, just to land this idea that behavioral science isn't just about, steering people towards like the correct choice, right? It can also be about, having a little bit of a bond between a good brand, a good product, and how we can, find some utility in somebody's life. So of all of those, I think E is probably my favorite, but I'm not supposed to have favorites.
No, that was a very good summary of the choice
Mm,
framework. It's like I said, what I enjoy about it is that you're not looking to prove a certain principle or whatever. It's just stuff
mm-hmm,
that you brought from your own practical
mm-hmm,
experience in designing experiences and designing products, and that's why I think it's so actionable. That for me, that's
mm,
the main word I always look in my own consultancies and my own
sure.
private work.
Yeah.
It's like actionability. It's if
Mm-hmm.
something is not actionable, then just don't say it. So
Yeah.
that's why I like about the choice model. It's easy to implement. It's easy to understand.
Mm,
I always recommend it to clients who are working on
mm-hmm,
specifically customer experience. But one of the main questions that normally I get from business or for practitioners themselves
mm-hmm,
is like, where does or how does behavioral design, behavioral science,
mm-hmm,
choice itself, where does it fit in this whole new, let's say, like structure in the design of an organization, right? So now you
Right.
have the UX, you have the CX, you have the service designers,
Hmm.
and you have everyone. You mentioned, for example, the journey mapping, right, or
Hmm.
mapping in general, right? So what I have, like, I've been trying in my career to figure out, like, where do we fit here? Is it like, are
Hmm.
we usurping a role that it was for someone else? Are we putting
Hmm.
something new? I have my own ideas, but I would really like, since it's you have so much experience in this, like, what
Sure.
is your take on this? Like, how do you apply the choice framework when you have a team of service designers and CX designers or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of different ways you can use the framework. And, the framework was built from, as we talked about, some of my professional experience, but then also going through case studies and examples from like the world's most successful brands and seeing like, okay, do they have any commonalities, things like that. Um, and you can use it as like a scorecard, right? You can say, just like you
Okay.
would, do any other balanced scorecard exercise, right? You can do a behavioral scorecard and you can say, okay, let's look at every single thing that we've got that touches a customer or that we'll get in front of a customer. Do we feel like, how are we performing on clarity? And this is how I use it with a lot of my clients as well, as a very first audit to say, like, if I'm breaking down a website, for example, and I kind of go through, I do like a green, amber, red, and just
Okay.
say, okay, well, like how initially, how do I feel like I'm performing in each one of these, right? Um, and I think that's the first most important, or at least the most effective way I've seen to use it. Because you will have people as well. Some of the, I don't want to say pushback, but often the first question I get when I'm explaining it to a client or when I was developing it, as I was working with clients was, well, I don't understand. Do I have to do all of these? And do I have to do all of these equally well?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Okay.
well, the idea is, yes, you should be performing across every single one of these. You should be considering and have, work streams that touch, all five of them. But you don't dial up every single one to 11, right? I mean, if everything was like as open as here's a good example. Disney World is a great example. Now you have open, O, and you have E, emotional.
Yeah.
Now, their whole emotion in Disney is like the magic of childhood. And
Hmm.
magic is all about misdirection, right? So the open side of things, where normally you would go to a Starbucks and say, "Oh, I want to see behind the counter. What are you doing?" That doesn't work for Disney, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work because if you can see the magic trick while the magician is performing it, it's not magic anymore.
It's not magic. Yeah.
But they do have certain, they pick and choose their moments to be open. And when they do that, it's more magical when they're kind of showing you what's behind the scenes. However, they pick and choose those moments. And they would never want to dial open up to 11. They don't want to over index on it because it takes away from the most important measure in my particular, feeling, which is the
Yeah.
emotional side of things, which is what makes the whole experience interesting and people want to come back for more because of the magic of not being able to see everything at the same time. But that doesn't mean that open doesn't play a big part in their experience. So if you have things like like fast pass, things like that, they've gotten in a lot of trouble because people don't necessarily feel like it's transparent how people are popping to the front of the line, or there's different fast pass lines and people are paying different things and people get confused and they feel like something's being withheld from them. Now that would be a really great place, a great pain point for them to use the open principle and say, people just don't like that we're not being transparent about how this is happening or what we're charging or why things change or why this line is long and it's not, someplace else or a different time of day. That is a good moment for them to go in and say, emotion, maybe less important in this, like the magic of childhood, less important. Here, people really just want to see what's going on behind the scenes. They want a little glimpse into why is this happening? And so that's what I would say. It's not that everything has to be turned up to the maximum volume at all times, but that at any time across your entire customer experience, you should be delivering on all five of those elements. Does that make sense?
That makes all the sense. Yeah, that is very interesting. Never thought about it like that. I thought that my approach to choice was basically like, okay, so I have these ideas I have to check.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought about how each, like, you have to, you have the journey, right? So
Mhm.
it's not only that you have to check the choice model for the whole journey, but in
Mhm.
specific moments, like there is like you said, it depends on what is your main objective in that moment. So
Mhm.
it's going to vary. That is very
Mhm.
interesting. Well, good input. So
Yeah.
you mentioned, like, for example, emotional, that
Mm.
it could be your, let's say, your favorite at some point. But what part of the model, and your experience with your consultancy and whatnot, do you think is the most frequent one that people tend to go to, or that people or
Mm.
your clients value more? Because maybe you value more
Mm.
emotion, right? But I don't know, maybe your
Mhm.
clients say, no, I want openness because it's more related to my
Mhm.
operations, right? So I was
Yeah.
thinking, like, for example, Uber or whatever,
Mhm.
these apps. Like, I think that the whole idea of transportation through taxis
Mm.
and stuff, like, revolutionized with the app because of openness. Right now
Mhm.
you can see
Mhm.
where the vehicle is, not only for you but for people that you share the ride for, just to they know that where you're going, so it connected directly to safety. So
Mhm.
there are so many things that open could really
Mhm.
help or has transformed certain industries. So, as like in this example, do you feel that, other than emotion, is there another one of the elements that you felt that has is very powerful, or that your clients tend to be more interested in?
I mean, it's a good question. I think the thing about a client, right, and that's whether it's a founder or like a marketing director or a CMO or whatever, is that most of the time they're not even thinking about their experience across any of those five elements. They're thinking about, does it deliver? Is it effective?
Hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Now, if you're working with like a brand team or something, they might think about, is it emotional? Um, but they're very focused on the things that will deliver value to them. Now, that being said, like once I kind of introduce the framework and they look at it, I think a lot of people really dial in on clear, because that is the closest thing to kind of what they're used to dealing with every day. Oh, well, if it's clear, if they understand that if they can see the CTA, then they'll be able to click it on it and buy things from us, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's the one that clients, I don't know, respond, they relate to the most. Um, Again, unless we're like working with a brand team or something, which then it's more the
Hmm.
emotional side of things open. They get those a little bit more. But it just depends on, yeah, what the client is used to doing, what their priorities are. And I think as it happens with behavioral science all the time, I mean, people see the value of a nudge because they understand, okay, well, if they choose A instead of B and A costs $20 more, that's good for business. I get that. That's easy. Because this, I mean, this all goes back to behavioral science principles too, right? You have to be concrete with people. If people can visualize an outcome, they're much more likely to say, like, oh, yeah, let's do that because I understand they choose A instead of B. I make more money. I hit my targets. I get a bonus. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes with
Definitely.
the other elements, that really is a matter of pulling in the behavioral science and the examples to say, well, open is really important because, Starbucks tried to take that openness away. They had the really tall espresso makers and fewer people came in the stores and they couldn't figure out what was going on. So Howard Schultz went into they were revamping the Starbucks stores, went into the Starbucks store and he was like, they can't see behind the counter. They can't talk to the customers. They can't make a personal connection. And he said, let's do an experiment and put the shorter espresso makers in here and see what happens. And sales went up because people were having the personal relationship. They were chatting with the barista. You could see what was going on. And it's one of those things where, the more examples like that, I think you can bring to clients and you can kind of say, you may not feel like that conversation is going to have an impact on your bottom line, but let me show you a million ways that that's actually true, that openness and that emotional connection can drive sales and drive the brand.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a very good point. And I can understand that what you mentioned about clear. My question would be, do you
Mm,
feel that this interest in clear, since it's so related, let's say, to UX or
mm,
the saliency concepts that you have to
mhm,
design in a clear, in a very clean way, or and whatever,
mhm.
is it specifically for digital experiences, or do you feel it also happens in non-digital experiences?
I mean, it's in both, really. I mean, the idea of simplicity, I think, has almost been over embraced in digital sometimes. If you want me to complain specifically, like Google, I think is kind of notorious for doing this, where they'll, instead of putting in like an icon that's familiar, they'll put in something that looks clean. And then you're like,
Yeah.
what is that thing? That's a new email? What, it doesn't even look like the email that the button I clicked for 15 years. It's completely different. So, you know, if you take like the visual simplicity, but sacrifice understanding or familiarity, like that's a problem. But in retail experiences, I mean, obviously, if you think back to, let's say like pre-Apple Store, I mean, that's why the Apple Store was so revolutionary, because it was just focused on the products. There weren't signs everywhere for things. It was just very product focused. It was very simple. It was easy to kind of see, oh, there's the laptops, there's the phones, wherever it was. And, you know, I think that is one of the reasons why obviously the Apple Store is something that everybody looks up to, that, you know, was so revolutionary when it debuted. But I do think, you know, coming into a store, and again, it depends on the brand, because some brands function really well. Like we're talking about physical retail now. If you think about like a Costco or like a TK Maxx or TJ Maxx, where it's these discount stores and you go in and it's kind of like a treasure hunt. And it's like, oh, the shirts are over there, now they're over here. And it's, for some people, that's very discombobulating. They do not like that. My mom hates to shop at like Marshall's or TJ Maxx or, you know, Costco, these places where things are in like bins. I love it, because the discovery for me is a part of being like, oh, I got a deal and nobody else got it because it was like the bottom of this rack or whatever. So for a brand like that, very clear, like simple retail experience doesn't work, because the appeal is hunting for a bargain, right? The appeal is walking around and seeing all this new stuff and sticking in the cart. Now, let's contrast that with the brand like, I mean, I think luxury is the easiest place to go. Like Chanel, Hermes, like Louis Vuitton, right? You don't want to walk into one of those stores and not just be overwhelmed by clutter. You don't want to not understand, okay, this is the section for purses, and this is a section for belts, and this is the section for scarves. You know, it's clean, it feels luxurious, it's very simple for me to understand where to look and how to absorb the product. So for them, treasure hunt doesn't work. Treasure hunt is the exact opposite of what their brand needs to accomplish. That being said, in any piece of marketing and any customer experience, I think it really behooves brands to know, what are people paying attention to? What are they seeing? What are they noticing? And 99, well, let's say 89 times out of 100, it is not what you think when you're designing the experience or the art, you know, like let's say a piece of marketing. You think, oh, well, they're going to definitely see this lettuce on this burger or whatever it might be. And they're also definitely going to see our logo down in the corner. And then you run it through like a predictive AI. Well, everybody missed your logo, but they only saw like the burger patty. So these are the kind of things where like best practice makes us feel one way. We think for sure we know exactly what the customer is going to notice, but we need to kind of go back and do some gut checking to say, is that actually what they're noticing? Like we need to make sure that, you know, our own like experience with something isn't clouding our objectivity for it.
This is so interesting, and it reminds me of one of your latest posts on LinkedIn where you put this photo of a bus crossing this this train road, railroad, and you know, like the bus was like, yeah, the designer's ideas, and then you just have the train just ramming the bus. That's the customer behavior, you know. So it makes a lot of sense, because it's what I tend to say, because even though behavioral science and behavioral design is like a big thing, we're talking about like basically like design principles that could be generalized, but the idea is that no, you have to actually custom make every experience depending on the brand, on the experience you want people to have, and that is never going to go away. These are just tools that can help you do it a little bit better. Right. But here my question for you, maybe because I feel I relate. I always use your information, what you put out, to as inspiration for my own content when I tend to do something. And my question is like, okay, so you're basically, because of your experience, you're an expert on customer experience, and everyone would say, yeah, Jen like has it all figured out. Like she has her model, she has all this information, all this experience. Should be like, she doesn't have to struggle with her own customer experience design for, let's say, choice hacking. So in your own experience as a product designer, as an experience designer, because you're designing experience for us who consume your content, what have been like your major challenges? Has it been as easy as everyone might think it has been? Do you have it all figured out? What's in your head?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like as a marketer, as somebody who's like, building the sites and building the courses and building on the content, it's a commonality, I think, when you're like a tactician in that way, where you're actually building something and not just strategizing about it, is sometimes you miss out on the luxury of time to kind of sit back and go, oh, is this salient? Like, is this too overcomplicated? I'm a big iterator. So what I often do is, go through a process. I'll say like, oh, okay, well, let's try this and we'll see how it goes. Like I use a lot of tools like Hotjar, especially on my website, which like is recording the user experiences and anonymizing them and everything, just so I can see like what's broken, what are people paying attention to, just to sort of, be in the corner observing and saying, okay, well, I thought it might go this way, but actually let's try something new and see how we go. Anybody who visits the website can probably tell I'm big on experimentation, just to see, because a lot of times I've had an instinct to do something on the site, especially, and tried it, and I'm like, oh, people are not getting this at all. We gotta stop, and I think that's just something that it's interesting, actually, as I'm starting to kind of get on in years in my career. You sort of see two paths emerge. You start to see people who are like, oh, well, I've been doing this for 20 years, so I know everything, and I don't think we need to test anything. And then you get a bunch of people who are like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know that half the time, more than half the time, we're wrong, and that we need to test things every single time because you never really know what people are going to do. And I can tell you that the second group of people who experiment are much easier to work with. They, in my experience, tend to be more successful because, well, they've got the humility to say, hey, I think based on a lot of years of experience and experimentation that this is going to work, but we just have to see what happens, which is always my big message to clients as well. Is it's like, look, you are paying me for expertise, which I do have. However, part of that expertise is knowing that I can't guarantee anything's going to go one way or the other. Nobody can guarantee that. And if someone who is like a behavioral designer or a behavioral marketer comes to you as a client and you're listening, and they say, I guarantee that this one thing, we're not going to test anything because this one thing is going to improve your sales by 100%, run, because that person does not know what they're talking about. You can't guarantee in this world anything. And I think part of it too is thinking about this idea that, and not to be critical, but I do see quite a few people who don't have a lot of, I'll call it real world experience using marketing or psychology, making a bunch of threads on Twitter about here's 15 psychological principles you have to use in, your next, like, I don't know, e-commerce website. And it's clear they've never used them because of the way that they talk about them. There is a copy paste mentality in some of these disciplines where people haven't really, I think, had enough experience of things going wrong, or, context affecting how successful one intervention might be over another one. And so that's what I would always say is, like we talked about the experience with Costco versus like Chanel, right? Like that's an example of context that you would need experience to just have gone through and then understand how to apply. And if you're somebody who is like, I'm going to copy paste an intervention from, oh, this was successful for McDonald's, so we're going to do it over here for, I don't know, Ferrari. Oh, and it'll work for Ferrari because it worked for McDonald's. And it's like, well, no, it's probably not going to. But then also, it might work for a portion of like 5% of Ferrari's customers. But what about the other 95%? Have you tested anything else to see? Some people might respond to like a loss aversion intervention versus a social proof versus, the list goes on and on. So that's another part of things. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Like, I've done a lot of work with like, call it like fast casual, fast food, like restaurants and things, like a lot of different brands. So this is not a comment on any specific brand. However, we found that, I found that prescribing like a social proof intervention, we tried a million different ways. We tried 70% love this product, or this is our most popular dish, all these things. Social proof always seemed to backfire, especially in fast food.
Wow.
The lower you went down the sort of cheapness ladder, social proof always seemed to backfire. And we would get comments like, I don't really care what the person in front of me ordered. And it's like, well, you don't even care like what the most popular dish is? No. Because it's like, they're familiar with the brand, they're going in, they're getting something habitual. And now that's not to say it doesn't work for everybody. Like there were probably, 10 or 15% of people in any one of those experiments that we ran that were like, oh, that's the most popular thing, I'm definitely going to get that. But overwhelmingly, the response was negative when we thought, oh, it'll be that makes total sense because there's an overwhelming size of menu. Why not know what the most popular dish at the particular restaurant or fast food establishment is that day? But people they weren't just like, no, they were like, hell no. I don't care. They were like getting upset. They were like, how dare you think that this person in front of me is going to, influence what I'm doing? So it's just an example of, we can never copy and paste. We have to really think about context. Definitely. I think for a marketer or, product designers and UX folks too, brand is a lot of that context. So you can't separate, this is the type of brand, this is the type of brand that we want to be, this is how people think and experience our brand. You have to combine that with the behavioral science things, right? You have to combine that with what type of nudge or, what type of intervention or, what type of memories do we want to create or where are the most emotional moments? That is all tied in with what brand are we? Who do we want to be? What market do we play in? Who's our customer? Because all of that affects how people respond, to different things and the type of customers that you get and, how they want to feel about an experience. And therefore, what types of interventions and approaches are going to be successful with the majority of those customers.
That makes a lot of sense. That is very interesting. And thinking about, you got me thinking about this thing with social proof and everything. It's like, it's like if it would be related to the level of uncertainty that someone has in a situation, and that's something that you don't read always in the books, right? When they talk about social proof, social influence, they don't mention that variable, for example, right? So that's a good point. That's very interesting. All right, so context, definitely big thing. I think it's one of the main things we've learned in behavioral science lately, right? That what you said, I completely agree. When someone says, I can guarantee this design is going to work, maybe you can guarantee that something is going to work if the company has never done anything. Like the bar is so low that whatever we do is just going to,
from zero, there will be a change.
Yeah, from zero.
How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
I can guarantee there will be some kind of change when we try something.
Yeah. but not, as you say, like something so specific. Nothing in human behavior can be that specific. And that leads me to one last question related to the model. Let's go to the I, right? In individual, you mentioned something like that hyper personalization or not. I know that you're now into a lot of things related to AI, for example, and AI and data analytics that has come before that is very focused on this idea that we can hyper personalize an experience based on what I can know about you, right? Spotify as an example, or what it is, or Google also as an example, right? Like you navigate and suddenly you got these ads from stuff you've been navigating before, that other people are not going to see. So what's your take on what do you think from now? Maybe we're all going to be wrong because it's so new, everything that's going on with AI. But what do you feel about this? Like in terms of algorithms and technology starting to not only show us information, but actually to construct it from information that we have. Do you feel that behavioral designers and in general researchers are going to be left out of this equation of consumer understanding and just, be focused on developing data and managing data and letting the AI do the rest of the work? How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can see both sides of it because you're right. You do have sort of the hyper personalization side, which that's been going on for years without AI, right? If you think about like a high-end hotel experience or a high-end restaurant experience where you've booked into this 3 Michelin star restaurant and they send somebody out to like scope out your Instagram the week before and they know that you like this and you don't like that, and and then you come in and it's like, oh, my favorite food is on the menu, what a surprise. Or a hotel where you stayed and spent thousands of dollars, and they know you like a certain type of champagne and you like a certain type of towel, certain kind of pillow, like that all happens, right? That has been happening in customer service especially for years and years without AI. Because I do think, at a certain point, it's just one of those things where I feel like as a marketing discipline for the past like 15, 20 years, we've really gone down this, everything's got to be personalized, has to be personalized. The more personalized it is, the more people love us, the better it is, the more we'll sell. And that's true to a point. However, you have to balance that then with the analysis that places like Ehrenberg Bass have done, where, most of a brand's sales are not coming from heavy users. They're not coming from grinding someone from staying in your hotel once a year to staying 6 times a year, 12 times a year. Like there's a limit on the growth there, right? So Ehrenberg Bass basically says that, your growth is going to come from light users. So those are people who, pick up your product way less than anybody else, but there's more of those people, right? Not everybody has to be like the most loyal customer that there ever was. And that's the reality as well. I walk into, a store and, I'm a Coke drinker and all they have is Pepsi. And, I say like, okay, Pepsi's fine. Well, does Pepsi now think I'm a Pepsi drinker? Does Coke now think I'm not a Coke drinker? Well, the reality is no. If I'm in some place and I just, that's cheaper, if it's on sale or whatever, I'll grab the other brand. So I think it's got to be a balance, because when you look at growth, yes, you can use something like AI to personalize things to such a point that you're creating this habit, this loyalty, and people just want to get more and more and more into your brand, but there's a limit. And then you look at, kind of the big wide world out there of people who don't buy from you. And, like I said, I mean, a lot of the marketing research says it's about being less targeted, because you're finding people who you would never think should be targeted. And they're all of a sudden looking at your product and going like, oh yeah, that's something I should try. So that's the danger. If you get too personalized and too targeted, like we have been with programmatic and paid and all of this stuff in the marketing world for the past 15 years, you miss out on the whole world of people who, yeah, they don't fit into your target, but they'll still buy your product. And there's a gazillion of them. And if they only buy my product once in their entire lives, but there's literally 2 billion of them, well, that's enough to make me like, the number one brand in this particular market forever. So that's the thing. It's all back to kind of the long and short of it. I don't want to call it a debate, but the balance that has to happen between kind of this long-term brand building, so that people who are not like your customers see your products and get exposed to your brand and hopefully pick up your product one day, versus like, the short term, I've got to maximize all the spend. I've got to target down to like a tiniest, little detail that somebody has that's going to indicate to us that they're going to buy our product 6 times a year instead of 1 time a year, whatever. So I guess the point is that, like everything, and I have been sort of in the marketing world for a while now. AI is very powerful. Obviously, there are dangers to it. For instance, like baking our own human biases into algorithms. This has been an issue for quite some time. If you think back to Amazon getting in trouble because their algorithm was proven to be sexist, racist for hiring.
Yeah.
Because the people that built it had these inbuilt unknown biases that were getting, pulled into the actual AI without their knowledge. I mean, that's been around for quite some time. So you have to think, I guess, about the dangers of it. You have to think about the danger of it getting too specific, too targeted, too, I guess we should say, measuring and optimizing for the wrong things that it thinks are the right things, but that may turn out to be the wrong thing. The example that comes to mind, I don't know if you read that story about, they had a AI running a drone, and the drone had, this is for the US military somewhere, and the drone had a human pilot, but they were far away. So they would be out of danger, and they would fly this little drone that was piloted by an AI, and it would go wherever it's going to go and drop a bomb and then come back, right? Well, they found out that the AI was like, okay, this human operator is just, they stink. So they were overriding the human operator and then just running off and like dropping this bomb someplace they weren't supposed to drop it. And then they said, no, you can't do that. So they changed all the things, and they said, you can't override the human pilot. And the AI said, okay, well, this human pilot still stinks. So they came back, it's all virtual, right? So they turned around where the human pilot was sitting and dropped a bomb on them. So like, oh, now I'm free.
What?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Didn't you read this article? Yeah, you should find it. It's kind of creepy.
I gotta check that out.
But it's an example of AI like designing for and measuring the wrong things. And this, it's just as much of a danger in something like marketing or customer experience as it is in, that is a customer experience, I guess, better for worse, that is a user experience. So yeah, I think it's a balance. There's some dangers. I think, obviously the past like 5 or 6 months, I think it's been very overblown. ChatGPT is going to take all of our jobs. Like, all right,
Yeah.
settle down.
Yeah.
Uh,
A little too much.
so we just have to kind of see over the next few years, like, where is it going to go? And AI is something that I've been using, very successfully with my clients for 5 or 6 years now, using these predictive AI tools that say
Cool.
1 billion people, all the data together says that they're going to look at this or experience this. And how do we use that, to make user research go a little bit faster? That stuff's great. I think with the generative stuff, we'll kind of see over the next, 6 months, year, 2 years, where it all really nets out. It does make me a little nervous, though.
I think it all for everyone. It's something new has always made humans nervous.
Yes.
What we don't understand, we fear. So yeah, I think it's a better position. We don't want drones dropping bombs everywhere. So it's a good way to approach it. But it's a very interesting take on hyper personalization, because there is a big, a big thing going on related to this, and every company, like you said, when behavioral science began, everyone wants to have behavioral scientists, but they don't know why. And the same thing happens with AI. Everyone wants algorithms. Why? I don't know. It's just sexy. So we have to be very careful with that, especially, well, I don't know, London and in general, the first world countries have it a little bit more developed right now. Here in Latin America, not many companies are really right now ready with their data to have this, but we have the advantage to see what goes right and what goes wrong with you guys.
Exactly. Just leapfrog all of our mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And then we just say, no, I'm not gonna do this. That exploded over there. So yeah. Okay, that is very interesting takes on that. So well, as always, that it always happens on my interviews, Jen. I always end up with so many questions more in my head, and especially in this conversation with you. But the time is really always on our is our enemy. But I've really been. I think I got a lot more from the interview than what I at the beginning expected. I have a lot of expectations, getting to chat about the choice model in more detail, getting to see like what is it that customers or your clients tend to focus and that challenges for you. So just to maybe like wrap things up, I would love to ask you if you can share like final ideas or anything that could be very helpful for people that are working on customer experience. And maybe I would specifically ask if anything related to what are the challenges now, right? Like because behavioral science, behavioral design has been growing slowly, but growing. And I see more people interested, especially in this part of the world, in acquiring new techniques and models to do better better customer experience. But what do you feel right now, having all this information now, are like the main challenges, if we can like close up with that?
Yeah, I mean, this might be a little bit like inside baseball, right? It might be a little bit like very industry focused. But I see a ton of behavioral science consultancies and experts having a really hard time with what you mentioned earlier, which is, where do we sit? Who's going to buy this? Like, how do we, because it's very, very rare, even with as educated as people are getting about behavioral science, that you have a CEO or a CMO sit someplace and go, I need to go hire a behavioral science consultancy. They just don't think that way. They think, oh no, my sales are down. We better hire an advertising agent. You know what I mean? Like they're thinking in a very different way. And that's not true of everybody. I mean, there's some very like behavioral science literate, like C-suite folks out there. But I think, to your point that you made earlier, this is a challenge I'm seeing over and over. And like, I think we've seen a lot of layoffs, especially, in the US, and a lot of people in my networks who've potentially, they're behavioral scientists, but they've gone into like UX research, things like that. Which UX research and customer experience and behavioral science all share this problem, which is people know they need it. They don't know how to use it. They don't know where it fits. So then they say, well, it didn't work. We tried it and it didn't work. Well, there's a lot of this idea of like, getting people to kind of understand how things fit within an organization, how you actually action things. And I think, to me, that's the biggest challenge that's out there right now.
That is a very, very good point. I really appreciate that info, because I mean, we're in Latin America, we're not seeing that just yet, but it just might come. in
Hmm.
terms of the layoffs and the situation right now with the economy is not good, but
Mm.
it's a very good point. It's a very good challenge. So thank you so much, Jen. I've been like really appreciating everything you've been telling us and sharing your experience with us.
Hmm.
I'm going to share, obviously, everyone who's watching, I'm going to share on the footnotes every single link I can from to get you more close to Jen. Specifically, Jen, many people are very interested in learning how to apply this.
Hmm.
So I understand you have your course related to customer experience, correct?
I do. Yeah, it's called How to Create Persuasive Experiences. So there's a few courses.
Exactly.
It's just choicehacking.academy. But that one in particular focuses on holistic customer experiences.
Awesome. That is going to be awesome. And obviously, I'm also going to share the link for the book. I would love to like show you the book right now, but I have it on my Kindle.
Yeah, I'm
So
trying to
I
see
would
if I have a
like
copy
people have
anywhere.
it. Yeah, but I'm going to share. I'm still going to share the link on Amazon so that people can
Mhm.
access. And I really want people to buy the book because there's so much
Yeah.
information, so actionable. I still remember the moment I was reading it. So thank you so much, Jen, not only for being here and sharing your experience with us, but again, like for everything you're doing, it's very helpful. There are so many people already doing things related to behavioral science and the principles, and it's good, but we need more people doing this in an applied sense, in
Mm.
showing how do we use this on marketing, how do we use this on customer experience, because that's like that part that
Mhm.
is missing from academia, right? Like we
Yeah.
have all the
Yeah.
scientific evidence, but we need to know what do we do with this scientific
Yeah.
evidence. So thank you so much for your
Yes.
work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. And also, like all the things you're doing, I think it's amazing. I mean, anytime, I mean, I'm happy to come back. I'm happy to answer questions over email if there's anything else that kind of pops up or
Awesome.
readers or listeners, I guess I should say, listeners and viewers have questions. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would say. Just visit choicehacking.com. There's a ton of free materials people can check out. Got courses, a free podcast, YouTube channel. So I do my best to try to, get out there and, share the information that I've found to be useful. So hopefully it's helpful for other people as well.
And you're doing a great job. So thank you so much, and
Thanks.
I'll take your word for it. I might ask you to come back at some point because there's
Okay.
again there are so many other questions I would like to get your take on. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Jen, and I hope we can see each other soon enough.
Yes.
Bien, chicos, espero que hayan disfrutado bastante de esta entrevista. De verdad que me ha encantado hablar con Jen y ahora sí estamos de vuelta en español. Como han visto, de verdad, hay muchos profesionales allá afuera que están aplicando los principios que aprendemos de Behavioral Science. No se trata solamente de aprender los títulos, como Jen nos estuvo comentando, pues hay un tema de, ok, puede usarte social proof, pero no va a funcionar en todas las situaciones. Entonces es importante que sepamos experimentar, como ya bien explicaba, es importante que sepamos probar y ver y tener la humildad suficiente de entender que nuestras ideas, por más bonitas e interesantes que puedan parecer, no siempre van a funcionar. Entonces por eso es tan interesante y tan importante la experimentación, la prueba y demás. Así que hemos llegado ahora sí al final del programa. Muchas gracias por seguirnos y por favor no te olvides de suscribirte al canal, es muy importante para nosotros. Siempre el algoritmo, hablando de algoritmos de YouTube, siempre nos ayuda bastante, así que si quieres seguir viendo más episodios, tenemos muchos más contenidos. Si es que te has perdido los videos anteriores, tenemos invitados muy interesantes y seguiremos teniendo más invitados, les prometo. Así que sin más, nos vemos en un siguiente episodio de En Vivo de Behavioral Pills.